So our opening keynote will be with His Excellency Maher Al Kaabi, advisor to Group Chairman Asirka Group, UAE Circular Economy Council member, co-founder of Blame, chairperson of Copperstone Education. Keynote title will be Responsible Leadership for Net Zero Climate Resilience in the Middle East. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
You continue. Summit of my purpose. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. I think we can't have a better place than having been a sustainable city and also C Institute. Very important topic to my heart. One of the closest topic to my heart is about responsible leadership in anything. And the most important one also people talk about, which is about kindness and how can become cities. But before that, I think we're living in a place where the leader himself, when he started to build the sustainable city and the institute itself, he had a vision of building something which not many people talk about globally, and even within the region itself. But the journey was not easy. He had to go through a lot of challenges to build the city. And I remember the being the financial crisis when we were saying to us and we were suffering from the same problems, that it was really challenging to continue to build. And we actually have one of the oldest environmental company in the region, which is in 1982 we started. So we know what suffering he has been going through, but because of himself and being steadfast and the key, which is very vibrant, they'd actually be sure they continue to do, and they did. And today they don't only deliver to here, they're also delivering the region and a handmade country called Hot. Apparently is also now in US and delivering something compelling as a single city over there, which is a mix. So really hats off to what we have been achieved with this scene here. What I intend to do is understand why the responsible leadership is very important, particularly the topic we're talking about, and how they actually bring anybody together, all the stakeholders together to make it happen. And what could be the way forward for us? Those who have been in this region literally for how many of you have been more than 20 years in the UAE? Okay, so you would resonate to what I said to, and the rest will get to know. If you studied history of the Middle East and the break sources, you would probably see that Middle East has been always cradle to innovations in the architecture. Today, Middle East can also be a cradle to sustainable climate resilience, proving that the responsible leadership can really be a bridge between heritage and also the future resilience and sustainability can become important. But having said that, climate change does not be this. Why I say that? Because if you look at the global arena in terms of how leadership are performing across different regions like constant climate change, there are different speeds of different understanding. And it's not happening the way it's supposed to happen. Imagine one of the biggest European countries, the administration goes back, I think, due to climate change. Some reasons are correct because you have probably been safe of politician that that's why I always say to educate, politicians should not be interfering in climate change. They shouldn't be talking about it. We should be to the Epidemian practitioners. They understand it more than they will do it better. So we have principalized this quite a lot. So I did to the some of the narrative of what the administration US trying to do, but some of them I don't do. So with that, it's important that we have that responsibility as leadership. So we have the leadership tackle globally across the system first. Not everybody is kind of the same. So the question for us is, are we ready to step into the leadership of each one of us here, each leader by himself, by creating something different? And how can we choose that? Leadership is not about only doing economic values, GDP, was the listed part, which is important to do because we need good resources. But I also rate something different, which is TSP, which is growth, sustainability, and prosperity. So we need to balance what we got. How we grow economies with responsibility. And that's very, very important. And I think I always says, humbly we say that God has blessed us with leaders who have been in forefront in thinking about them. Whatever we're going to do, I'm going to talk about ability examples of what they have done to make you resonate faster. And then probably when summarize all these examples, what is the right model for us to actually transition from the big economy to circulate money. I'm not going to define terms of it because I believe most of you understand the difference between big economy and circular economy rate. Is that right? Do I have a try about? Yes. Okay, great. Excellent. But before that, let's have a seat of GCC or Middle East, but I'll be focused on UAE more because this is where you did it and we can people are excited. Middle East submit about 8% of CO2 emission. The highest is China by design because the world believe that China is supposed to be the world factory because here has to be the cheaper anyway. That's why they're at 1%. But China is transitioning much faster than we think of. I'm not going to build China, but that's what take me a full day to do because we deal with them. We do a lot of work with them, so we understand how far advanced they are in their process system. But if you look at the energy sector within the Middle East, that's about 5.8%, which is kind of a big portion of the 8%. So that's huge, of course, with Black Army. And they know that sea is going to be expanded. World Bank estimated that 2.5 billion people will be moving into cities by 2060. People moving into cities, that's you need to do buildings. One of the buildings, when we say then if it 1%, we are discovered 8% of CO2 emission. And if you have buildings, that means you have touring or heating. And touring heating, I mean, anything it means responsible like 37 to 40% of your production. That's mean the situation that access will get even further. But the big news is 60% of our cities are yet to be built. That's mean we can still rewire the way we build cities. Because we don't have a very long time because that means flying very fast. But we need to make sure that we are rewired and good. And we can see not just the world will very, very quickly in the way we need to build those cities. Of course, that would put pressure more and more. And given that we have border scarcity in the region, we continue to rely on destination. But destination is not really good for the environment by biodiversity and the sea level. But the news is UAE is doing one of the most dangerous destination plan by 2027, where it will have almost no impact on the world. So it's a futuristic way of looking at it. When I look at the model itself, 1% and dope with the way it is, it looks like a future part in the middle of the ocean. It's just amazing, fascinating. Of course, that's mean we require to transition to different sources of energy, renewable ones from the other carbon that we have today. There's more pressure over there, will be put in over there. And we still require responsible leadership to make that happen. And we discipline what we have is also leadership. Some of the more stuff we see, the four sectors, in fact, to contribute to the 8% emission that we do. The first one is start have a fossil energy source, which is 39%. Next is the cities because they brought a lot of CO2. The cities contribute by 21%. Then you have the other sector, which is residential, that you have as well transportation, so industrial far than the industrial than the cities itself. So when we looked at this, what's happening? After signing the Paris support, own countries, 35 countries signed it initially, and UAE has been number one in the Middle East, the first country in the region to sign the Paris. I mean, people crops out to pick up their plans. And that was very important because when we transition and go to be net zero by 2050. But what happens is you're not going to be actually net zero by 2050. I'm sure you're aware of that, right? And I was 2 years ago, and apparently with one of the panelists will be with me in February. Yes, if you should now be honest, announce that we're not going to be net zero by 2050 because it's not going to happen. Because if we do moderate, we used to be that model for ourselves. AI models, and you can also not say that whether you put on or not, and you say, listen, I've been preparing the 10 years it's going to happen because of many factors. So, that doesn't be the that's me, but he would sit and he sets us on whatever the task he have to work up there. But the question should come into us, is it when do we actually go and hit the net 50? Is it more important to know how? Because once you set the part, it is also important how do you achieve that part. And those will be the big blocks about BTB. It's first you pick your strategy. And the very important one was energy strategy itself, which was in 2017, is how do we actually make sure that we decarbonize and we don't depend on your fossil fuel. That was the most important strategy. I'll skip all the literature because you probably know all this. But I'm going to be is 2071. By the way, all these strategies here, we're very transparent as a government. You can put a website called u.ae, you stand for u.ae. Everything we do, whether it's digital economy or simple economy, or the plan to Dubai, it's all mentioned in there. So you can read trappers to see what the government is doing. But those are basic have been here for over 20 years. You've seen wherever government funds committed, they always did it. We may change the matter a bit for the bettering of the pie itself and to take the adaptation or the new technology yield. But what's interesting about 2021, the government summit, our president Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, he said we should be ready by 2071 to celebrate the last barrier board. Let me have boy, why would you celebrate the last barrier board? You say don't have more, right? But that's the mindset that we want to diversify from the carbon. And that's some strong message across all the other movies. And to Danish individuals. That's meaning they have to work good work. It's a mail that takes with the company around. Of course, the cabinet approves the establishment of the Greater Britannia Council, which was in 2021. The policy was laid out and what need to be done. Now, why we want to address and change and transition all the industry in B, but there were 4 key sectors that we want to first focus and transition on. Of course, I put them next called MIF and IDA-C. They're not in the same polio on the slide over there. I'm starting with manufacture. How we make sure that we manufacture and go back to design and part of materials which are sustainable and circular in nature. They don't use only one part, but use a number of times in the car. I, which is infrastructure, how to make sure that we have green technologies, WZTB and going compactful. We provide some of the services over there with the metros and our area. And F about food, how to make sure that we conserve big sources that we have a food. Food by 40% of food get wasted all the way from production, transportation, storage, and then usage. And unfortunately, we're one of the nations which has high wastage of food. So how do we minimize that food wastage? How do we use what just been wasted as a biofuel for the future, which were companies that have been using local companies on that, 2 different solutions for doing. And of course, that transportation is very important. So this is how the policy the how does. But I'm also interesting before that, very short video clip about Masa. How many of you know Masa? Okay, quite cover, which is about 60% of the come. Before you do the paths, I didn't be there. I'm gonna go along the paths a certain law. Masa was established in 2006. When the 4th C pillar of Masa starting was 1, how do we actually build an economy so diversify the economy from hydrocarbon, but also economy itself need to be good from differently and not relying only on powers. That was first. Second pillar of Nasda was on how do we actually excel in research and development and innovation. And for that to happen, of course, we need to attract talents. You know what they did? They worked across the best universities, best power companies to attract investment. It was not easy. I'm talking about 2004 because 2006 was sour, so the world was happening before that. Imagine today if somebody from big university or another university globally become one university who fortunately was still doing, but not as more of having a lot of tons given to the research and development because the university then you got a lot of give up me, which is very important for your development and your findings. So imagine doing that of this very not by this. The third thing what light on is how we become a beacon of new ideas where we can share the say to everybody. The only way the grow it so we can share the diversion of purpose in national partners. Number 4 was all about how we commercialize. Because if you want to be sustainable, you always need to take care of the third P. Not only planet, not only people, but also profitable. Because if you're not profitable, we won't need to say. So all the identified you must come up way. It has to be sustainable that be commercialized. Of course, we built the Masa City, which is a living test bed, I would say a living laboratory where you can test these things with there, which is what made. So this is what Masa does. So I'll take some of the numbers. They're actually in more than 40 countries. There are over 200 projects globally that invest over $20 billion. That's $1 billion, $12 billion every day. These are non-recourse loan have been did this. Meaning that is the loan is something paid by the country itself. If you not go back, country they pay from it. That's very non-recourse. So they invest $20 billion into these countries. Even some items they've invested in, I've never heard about it in Modern Plus. Immediately popped up around. Okay, and these are some of their projects. I'll not be able to list all the 200 projects over here, but just to give you a glimpse of the projects that we have been doing, Bijmu. So this is where we sharing knowledge and sharing expertise that we have across markets from east to west. To be honest with you, of course, carbon capture was very important for us. How can we know that we power that? Very few. This was the second project announcement that we invested on second phase of public capture back in November 2023. We invested about 13 billion dollars. The first one happened in 2008, by the way, that early on. Combined project capture, both of them will be able to abate about 2.3 million tons of CO2, which is like moving effect of 500,000 liters per hour. So that's huge. Of course, there is a national strategy on hydrogen. Muscle is working on will have 1 million ton of hydrogen by 2030, but the national strategy is for the Kaabi is about 50 million ton by 2060 because hydrogen is still of course become cheaper as we go as a solar panel will be there to the last 23 years. We've also pledged to take a 35% stake in ExxonMobil. That was last year. And also in public capture. The reason why we're doing that in Exxon is because Occidental Petroleum is associated with them because they were a company called Carbon Engineering, which is a company. They were the first actually to do hard capture in that's which is 1 ton per day, which is very small, but they want to multiply that by 20. So that's another project that we're working on. Of course, Dubai has been the leading when it comes to building the most concentrated, the largest concentrated one single base of solar power, which is Dubai. It was initially 5 gigawatt, but has got one upgraded to 7 gigawatt by the way. Of course, huge investment going on again and again. If you look at the airlines, you're also trying to invest in SAF. When the science ship, I don't know, to visit our domain during Vertex, he asked me, what are you trying to do? What's your next product? I said, we're working on SAF because SAF is not easy to work on with the part of support. So if you give me a word that it will not take a payment, I'm going to in SAF. We're already researching that, working on SAF development because we already had biofuel being used in our oil panels for this year. We're also working on SAF as well. Master already talked about it. ADNOC is the only oil leading company that its entire operation is then using greens. Already know that. That tells you a flagship airline like Etihad Airline, they've got a clear roadmap on how they become net zero by 2050. And what's interesting in this, it's the first thing, which is their investment in a research and development SDRC. That's not now. If you go research and bring academia to the whole formula, that will be take us a long way, of course. We've opened up in Indonesia the largest floating solar pan. We have Dr. Science Yudi, the Minister of Foreign Trade. We work with him very closely as well. And Ramahi Group CEO of Mazda. We've committed to Africa $10 billion to generate 10 gigawatt of energy by 2050 for them. And various other projects. Of course, you also seen and heard about Dubai Dubai, how we're going to change completely Dubai to make it a city which is walkable by 15 to 20 minutes for 55% of people who have access to the sector of transportation as well. So everything is happening. And this, I'm going to spend a few minutes in this slide. So, all example I mentioned, we talk about government, we talk about policies, they're coming up policies, and they'll be responsible to come up to that. We talked about government also partnering with research and development, academia, which is very, very important, and also involving private companies, make sure that all the stakeholders are working together. Now, if one of the stakeholders are missing from here, you'd still make it, but it took a long time for you to choose things. One of the things missing here, I'll let you off of that water, which is very, very important. I'll give you the personal example. I said the chair of school and universities, and one thing you want to do at the school is carbon become sustainable wherever you. And realize for us to change, we have to make sure that the entire DNA of the school will change. Because today, the science subject does issue about the reuse, recycle, and reduce. But it's not the one section. I used to do that thing when I used to teach my children about saving the video. Only here, down here, carbon CD. Okay, so, but we said, okay, this hobby is sense it's passively across the school. So we said, do we reskill and still find from the principal and the MSR, the teachers, the orders, everybody else. So we have to first reskill that. Then we said, how can we transpire whatever happens on subject to the other subject? We're not going to teach this to the people, but need to practice this in the praise out. We need to put papers in the size in the Islamic cards, or can we get away from it? And if you're not printing, can we tell the students why they're not printing? Because probably will say it is. So probably that's that message things into that. Do we use markers or do you use smart codes? Why do we use both? So we can keep on making of that. It was a bit successful in the beginning, but definitely heart-filled misery. Can you guess what was the reason? When they went home, they unlearned wherever they live. Because parents were not lying. So we have to engage parents. But if not engaging that is just to do it because our they're very difficult for us to do. Imagine telling them conserve food, conserve water, conserve purpose, right? Immediately they say, who are you to that this? You have abandoned the belt and can do whatever you want to do. No cliche. So we expect to do food quality and content. We said you cannot bring food which is unhealthy. If me, we are taking care of our children and stuff. We need to make sure that we feed them correctly. Do whatever you want to do at home. But at school, you need to make sure the food, their snacks are healthy snacks. You're not back for a year. As of after that, if you bring with the empathy, it'll confiscate. Unfortunately, that will relate this and topic foods. So we need confiscate a lot of food because sometimes you need to do a soft wrap, like Dr. Lee does. I said, you always have a carrot approach before you use the sick. So we also have the carrots and then music. So we didn't say it in school. After 4 years of continuously working on that, the school became sustainable. Today, you bought in the school, the society is buzzing in your face. In every single honor, every single person, every single everything over there. So there's no wastages. For every single wastages, we have a machine which will reward you. And we smart it very wise in old habits. Why am I sure this is? Few reasons. One, if you want to change anything, start from small. That's your base. Don't just rely on ossos. Start from small. We require a bit definance for this to happen. Again, this do that this is exactly what we did, starting with the The Z principle that we government live by is one, that anything we want to come up with, the government need to adopt it first before it asks anybody else to adopt. ID, the ministers, all the people working with them, spend minus one, minus two, minus P, has to adopt it. So by training them, we split. So they debate. Second, create an economy out of that, where people can posture, people can see, can put value upon. Third, share the values for every return successes with our global partners. So we can commit, and this is exactly what most of us create upon one of better is how we share successes to partners. And this is what we did and very. Of course, when we wrote our first cohort policies, we worked on funding policies and regulatory costs. And on the four sector that I mentioned, MIFE, right? Manufacturing, food, infrastructure, and transportation. We did not work with ourselves. You could have issued the policy like this is the policy now for this waste, it's the policy for food, it's the policy for this related matters. What we did instead, for every single policy, we wrote the subject matter expert from the private sectors. We also collaborated with academia. We also collaborated with NGOs internationally, like the Carver Foundation in UTech. So we worked together and created workshops in separate sessions, either for the draft policies or even actually live workshop of that. And only then these policies bridged. So they were not done in isolation. They were actually not with collaboration with people. Similarly, the second cohort, we're working on health equality policies plus. We exactly do the same thing. We factor following the same thing. We just met, I think, roughly a month ago before, and we both wide of for private sectors, give them voice the roadmap, and now I'm going to bring out the sessions of working at a single bar. And this is how we accept making that. Why do you think we achieved what we achieved? To summarize that, it was all about leadership. It's all about leadership who had clarity of vision of what they always do and sincerity. Because we're not sincere, they would be called about it. You can be a comedian for 6 months. I always say that on average. After that, they show you two paths. Immediately. I used to say everything wherever we used to have an issue in my previous organization. I was in an organization we were not a conference level. I had the benefit to work in British, which is Gobi. So I know how problem works everywhere. Because I just worked with all of them. It being worked. So whenever we get the issue of relax, don't get excited or already excited what we decided to sit in 6 hours, people will change. Higher adults, it's in laws. And it's all about execution. In the corporate world, we call it the govern to growth. Another important thing is how you have a key which is constantly aligned in what we want to be. Sometimes we see the vision here and people are going to get things done. But if you go down, trickle down, like some of the neighboring countries are actually learning through themselves, friends to themselves, how they make sure that all the people are actually aligned to what we want to be. And there are ways of getting that done. And the way have been said, being the hope of English behind it. But well, this legacy did not start down. This legacy has been there with the founding father. Sheikh Zayed is kind of him, please do so. It was ingrained in him to take care of the environment. He himself actually didn't bring water to Max. And when people asked him behind us, why are you building these? And this was inside in the 80s and 90s in the desert. His simple answer was, our faith imbues us and tells us that we should take care of the environment. So in Papua Van, you should pick everyone. That's not that big piece. That was one of the things to do, but the many other things we used to do. So this inspiration came from this, by the way, from Shizai, who actually made that narrative. This is a very short clip for you. The late Shizai was known for his love of nature. During an inspection of the line development projects, the late Shizai noticed that one of the city's oldest trees was located in the middle of a road that was under construction. He requested to keep the tree and that the road should be surrounded to preserve it. Trees and agriculture were just as important as infrastructure, roads, and buildings to the late Shazai. And during his rule, between 100 and 150 million trees were planted across the UAE. The late Shazai continues to inspire numerous environmental projects in the UAE. Nothing new going to say all the time. It's been always that. So, what's the main forward for us? What immediately? My first message was and will always be wherever you go back out to life, need to think of these things. How do we make sure we put this changing in the DNA of our culture, whether it's just governance, or there's a company, or wherever you are? Remember, in the beginning I said, it's responsible leadership does not mean that you have the authority to do that. You yourself are also asked to make the change. Every single change you did today, tomorrow, will fill in their buckets. So we each are responsible and make this happen. Well, how do we do that thing? We need to educate ourselves. We see ourselves. We work with security. Of course, we need to make sure that we excel in innovation. National innovation, you were reproduce of civilization and innovation. We need to bring that value there. In Saudi, you saw with some example I mentioned, but trusting the example or so many. I'll probably the entire day of the week to talk about that. How do we build bridges with people? It cannot work in isolation. I always say, if I'm going to digitize what on the left of my face, and then after that, this trade will go to another country in which is completely manual of what achieving. So I pass on my learning to that, so they also can benefit. So the entire chain supply chain becomes healthy out of the foundationalization. Similarly for sustainability. How do we quickly always measure or redo and adjust our plan as we also do? Because not can we figure out each source. It's such a smooth saying. You would say these challenges along the way. All the time. If there are no challenges, there's something wrong with the plan. Or maybe you're too lucky in your performance, sir. So I think you need to adjust all the cambio back to make sure it happens. I'll end it with the last quote of his Spanish and the president of UAE. He set up in the same public seminar in 2015. So when he was a crown prince at that time, it was all about the messaging probably in the next 60 years build something which is diversified and sustainable economy for the future generations so we can actually accept them. When you go home to likes, Please remember, teach yourself, teach your loved one to understand human persons. Remember.
So our opening keynote will be with His Excellency Maher Al Kaabi, advisor to Group Chairman of Sirka Group, UAE Circular Economy Council member, co-founder of Blink, chairperson of Copperstone Education. Keynote title will be Responsible Leadership for Net Zero Climate Resilience in the Middle East. Your Excellency, Empire is the it'll change the sign for.
Right, warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. I think we can't have a better place than having being a sustainable city and also Sea Institute. Very important topic to my heart. One of the closest topic to my heart is about responsible leadership in anything. And the most important one also to talk about, which is about climate and how can we become climate resilience. But before that, I think we're living in a place where the leader himself, where he started to build the sustainable city and the institute itself, he had a vision of building something which not many people talked about globally and even within the region itself. But the journey was not easy. He had to go through a lot of challenges to build the city. And I remember this during the financial crisis, what he was telling to us, and we were suffering from the same problems, that it was really challenging to continue and build. And we actually have one of the oldest environmental company in the region, which is in 1992, we started it. So we know what suffering he has been going through, but because of himself and being steadfast and the team, which was very vibrant, they actually made sure they continued to do and they deliver. And today they not only delivered over here, but also delivering in the region and a neighboring country called Han. Apparently he's also now in US and delivering something compelling, a sustainable city over there, which is amazing. So really hats off to what he has been achieved with this team over here. What I intend to do is understand why the responsible leadership is very important, particularly the topic we're talking about, and how they actually bring everybody together, all the stakeholders together to make it happen. And what would be the way forward for us? Those who have been in this region in the Middle East, how many of you have been more than 20 years in UAE? Okay, so you would resonate to what I said too, and the rest will get to know it. If you studied history of the Middle East as the correct sources, you would probably see that Middle East has been always cradle to innovation and civilization. Today, Middle East can also be a cradle to sustainable climate resilience, proving that the responsible leadership can really be a bridge between heritage and also the future resilience and sustainability we talk about. So it becomes important. But having said that, climate change has no VIP list. Why I say that? Because if you look at the global arena in terms of how leadership are performing across different regions when it comes to climate change, there are different speeds. a different understanding. And it's not happening the way it's supposed to happen. Imagine one of the biggest emitting countries, the administration pulls back from anything to do with climate change. Some reasons are correct because we have probably made a mistake of politician did that. That's why I always say, as I advocate, politicians should not be interfering in climate change. They shouldn't be talking about it. We should leave it to the academian practitioners. They understand it more. They will do it better. So we have politicized this quite a lot. So I agree to the some of the narrative of what the administration in the US trying to do, but some of them I don't agree with. So with that, it's important that we have that responsibility as leadership. So we have created the leadership vacuum globally when it comes to sustainability, unfortunately. Not everybody is doing the same thing. So the question for us is, are we ready to step into the leadership role? Each one of us here, each leader by himself, by creating something different. And how can we change that narrative? Leadership is not about only growing economic values, which is GDP, gross domestic products, which is important to do because we need those resources. But I also bring something different, which is GSP, which is gross sustainability prosperity. So we need to balance both together. How do we grow economies? Responsibly. And that's very, very important. And I think I always says, humbly we say that God has blessed us with leaders who have been in forefront in thinking about them. Whatever we're going to do, I'm going to talk about, I'm bringing examples of what they have done so it will resonate faster. And then probably we'll summarize through these examples what is the right model for us to actually transition from the linear economy to circular economy. I'm not going to define terms over here because I believe most of you understand the difference between linear economy and circular economy already. Is that right? You have a try thought? Yes. Okay, great. Excellent. But before that, let's have the state of GCC or Middle East, but I'll really focus on UAE more because this is where we live in and we can give a lot of examples. Middle East emit about 8% of CO2 emission. The highest is China by design because the world believes that China is supposed to be the world factory and because they're actually producing for everybody. That's why they're 51%. But China is transitioning much faster than you think of. I'm not going to admit it to China, but that's what I take me a full day to do it because we deal with them. We do a lot of work with them, so we understand how far advanced they are when it comes to sustainability by the way. If you look at the energy sector within the Middle East, that's about 5.8%, which is kind of a big portion of the 8% itself. That's huge, of course, because of the hydrocarbon. And you know that city is going to be expanding. World Bank estimated that 2.5 billion people will be moving into cities by 2050. People moving into cities, that's we need to build buildings. When we build buildings, that means city going to emit about 80%, they're responsible for 80% of CO2 emission. And if you have buildings, that means you're going to have cooling or heating. And cooling and heating, they make anything between responsible about 37 to 40% of CO2 emission. That means the situation going to exacerbate even further. But the good news is 60% of the cities are yet to be built. That means we can still rewire the way we build cities. Because we don't have a very long time because time really flying very fast. But we need to make sure that we rewire very quickly. And we can see technologies are evolving very, very quickly in the way we need to build our cities. Of course, that will put pressure more on water. And given that we have water scarcity in the region, we continue to rely on desalination. But desalination is not really good for the environment, the biodiversity, and the sea level. But good news is UAE is building one of the most safest desalination plant by 2027, which will have almost no impact to the water. So it's a futuristic way of looking at things. So when I looked at the model itself, when it was getting built the way it is, it looks like the future pod in the middle of really the ocean. It's just amazing, fascinating. Of course, we require to transition to different sources of energy, the renewable ones from the hydrocarbon that we have today. So there's more pressure over there going to be put in over there. And you still require responsible leadership to make that happen. And we sit in the region where we have responsible leadership. Some of the worst stuff you see, the four sectors which actually contribute to the 8% of emission that we do. The first one is, of course, the energy source, which is the 39%. Next is the cities because they're emitting quite a lot of CO2 emission. So cities contribute about 21%. Then you have the other sector, which is residential. Then you have as well transportation. Sorry, industrial is higher than the industrial than the cities itself. So when we look at this, what's happening after signing the Paris Accord? All the countries 55 countries signed it initially. And UAE has been number one in the Middle East, the first country in the Middle East to sign the Paris Agreement. people perhaps started putting up their plans. And that was very important because they want to make sure how do we transition and go to be net zero by 2050. But the bad news is we're not going to be actually net zero by 2050. I'm sure you're aware of that by now. And I was 2 years ago in a panel with one of the panelists who will be with me and from UNCCC. I said, you should now be honest and announce that we're not going to be net zero by 2050 because it's not going to happen. Because if we do morally, we should develop models ourselves, AI models, and you can also model say that whether you're going to be or not. And we said, I've been advocating for 10 years, it's not going to happen because of many factors. So, that doesn't mean we derail. That's me. But we will still at UAE steadfast on wherever the plans we have, we will work on them. But the question coming to us, is it when do we actually go and hit them at 50? Or is it more important to know how? Because once you set the target, it's also important how you'd achieve that target. And those will be the building blocks of what need to be done. Of course, UAE put their strategy. And the very important one was energy strategy itself, which was in 2017, is how do we actually make sure that we decarbonize and we don't depend only on fossil fuel. That was the most important strategy. I'll skip all in the middle because you probably know all of it, but I'll go to the 2071. By the way, all these plans you see over here, we're very transparent as a government. You can go to a website called u.ae, U standing for UAE.ae. Everything we do, whether it's digital economy or circular economy, urban planning with Dubai, it's all mentioned over there. So you can really track us to see whether the government is doing it. And those who've raised their hand, being here more than 20 years, you've seen whatever government promised, committed, they always delivered. We may change the plan a little bit for the betterment of the plan itself and to take advantages of the newer technologies available today. But what's interesting about 2031, in the government summit, our president, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, he said we should be ready by 2071 to celebrate the last barrel of oil. When you have oil, why would you celebrate the last barrel of oil? You said, don't want to have more oil, right? But that tells you the mindset that we want to diversify from the hydrocarbon. And that sent a strong message across all government entities and to the leadership committee as well. That means we have to work very hard. He said many other things which I'll come to there on. Of course, the cabinet approved the establishment of UAE Circular Economy Council, which was in 2021. The policy was laid out, what need to be done. Now, while we want to address and change and transition all the industries within UAE, but there were 4 key sectors that we want to first focus and transition on. Of course, I put them in an acronym called MIFT, M-I-F-T. They're not in the same order in the slide over there. I'm starting with manufacturing. How do you make sure that we manufacture and go back to design and come up with materials which are sustainable and circular in nature? They're not used only one time, but used a number of times in the economy. Which is infrastructure. How do we make sure that we have green technologies in terms of DB and enablement of that as well? We provide some of the services over there with the metros and Abu Dhabi Rail. And F, about food. How do we make sure that we conserve resources that we have of food? We know food, about 40% of food get wasted all the way from production, transportation, storage, and then usage. And unfortunately, we are one of the nations which has high wastage of food. So how do we minimize that food wastage? How do we use what is being wasted as a biofuel for the future, which one of the companies that we have been using? We've got 2 companies around that, 2 different solutions we do it. And of course, then transportation, which is very important. So this is how the policy definitely does. But it was interesting before that, very short video clip about Mazda. How many of you know Mazda? Okay, quite a number of you, which is good. Which is about 60% of the crowd. Before even the Paris agreement being there, I'm going to go along with us what's going on. Mazda was established in 2006. And the 4th key pillar of Mazda starting was, 1, how do we actually build an economy so diversify the economy from hydrocarbon, but also the economy itself need to be built on differently and not relying only hydrocarbon itself. That was first thing. Second pillar of Mazda was about how do we actually excel in research and development and innovation? And for that to happen, of course, we need to attract talent. You know what they did? They went across the best universities, best companies to attract the best talent. It was not easy. We're talking about 2004 because 2006 was established. So the work was happening before that. Imagine you bring somebody from Yale University or any other university globally to come and work in a place UAE. Of course, UAE was still known, but not as known of having a lot of funds given to the research and development, because in universities in the US, they got a lot of R&D funding over there, which is very important for your development and come up with innovative ideas. So imagine bringing that would be difficult, very not that easy. The third thing that it was relied on is how we become a beacon of new ideas where we can share this thing with everybody, not only in UAE, but globally, so we can share it with the regional partners and international partners. Number four was all about how do we commercialize whatever we innovate. Because if you want to be sustainable, you always need to take care of the third P. Not only planning, not only people, but also profitability. Because if you're not profitable, you're not going to be sustainable. So the only innovative idea that the master will come up with, it has to be sustainable, that we commercialize that. And of course, we built the Master C, which is a living test bed, I would say a living laboratory where you can test your things over there, which is working very beautifully. So this is what Master did. So I'll try some of the numbers. They're actually in more than 40 countries. They have over 200 projects globally. They've invested over $20 billion. The $30 billion, $12 billion you see over here, these are the non-recourse loan had been given, meaning that if the loan is not being paid by the project itself, we cannot go back to the country and take money for that. That's the no-recourse money over here. So they invested $20 billion into these countries. Even some islands they've invested in, I've never heard about in my geography classes today. So maybe they popped up later on. Okay, these are some of their projects. I will not be able to list all the 200 projects over here, but just to give you a glimpse of the projects that we have been doing regionally. So this is where we're sharing knowledge and sharing expertise that we have across markets from east to west, to be honest with you. Of course, carbon capture was very important for us. How many of you know that we do carbon capture? Very few. Okay, good. This was a second project announcement that we invested on second phase of carbon capture back in November 2023 of investing about $30 billion. The first one happened in 2008, by the way, that early on. Combined project capture, both of them will be able to abate about 2.3 million tons of CO2, which is about a moving effect of 500,000 vehicles per annum. So that's huge. Of course, there is a national strategy on hydrogen. Master is working on to have 1 million ton of hydrogen by 2030, but the national strategy is for the entire UAE is about 15 million ton by 2050, because hydrogen is still going on. Of course, it's going to become cheaper as we go, as well, solar panel will be there for the last 23 years, by the way. We've also pledged to take a 35% stake in ExxonMobil, and that was last year. And also carbon capture. A reason why we're doing that thing, Exxon is doing it, because Occidental Petroleum is associated with that, because they bought a company called Carbon Engineering, which is a Canadian company, and they were the first actually to do carbon capture in Dallas, which is 1 ton per day, which is very small, but they want to multiply that by 20. So that's another project that we're working on. Of course, Dubai has been the leading when it comes to building the most concentrated, the largest concentrated in one single place, a solar panel, which is about, it was initially 5 gigaton, but has gone upgraded to 7 gigawatt, by the way. Of course, huge investment going on again and again. If you look at the air, His Highness Sheikh Ahmed Babdoum, he's an hour he's doing duetics. He asked me, what are you trying to do? What's your next project? I said, we're working on a science subject. This has to be across the school. So we said, we need to reskill and skill, starting from the principal and the admin staff, the teachers, the workers, everybody else. So we had to first reskill them. Then we said, how do we transpire whatever we have in the science subject to the other subject? We're not going to teach sustainability, but we need to practice sustainability. For example, do we need to create papers in the science, in the Islamic, classroom? Or can we get away from it? And if we're not printing, can we tell the students why we're not printing? Because probably we're saving trees. So probably gets that message sinks into that. Do we use markers or do we use smart boards? Why do we use both? So we can keep on resonating on that. I was a bit successful in the beginning, but later on we quite failed miserably. Can you guess what was the reason? When they went home, they unlearned whatever they learned, because parents were not aligned. So we had to engage parents. But we could not engage them directly sustainability, because that would have been a very difficult route for us to do. Imagine telling them conserve food, conserve water, conserve clothes, right? Immediately they'll say, who are you to tell us this? We have abundant their wealth. We can do whatever we want to do. No more cliche. So we've started with food quality. So in quote, we said you cannot bring food which is unhealthy because we are taking care of your children's health. We need to make sure that you feed them correctly. Do whatever you want to do at home. But at school, you need to make sure their food, their snacks are healthy snack. We were at that for a year. I said, after that, if you bring anything unhealthy, we'll confiscate it. Unfortunately, we had to donate those unhealthy foods. So we did confiscate quite a lot of food because sometimes you need to do a soft rut, like what UAE does. I said, we always have a carrot approach before you use the stick. So we always come up with the carrots and then we do stick. So we did the same thing in school. After 4 years of continuously working on that, the school became sustainable. Today, if you go to the school, the sustainability is buzzing on your face. In every single corner, every single person, every single avenue over there. So there's no wastages. For every single wastages, we've kept a machine which will reward you. And you started minimizing all these kind of things. Why do I share these things? Few reasons. One, if you want to change anything, start from home. That's your base. Don't just rely on answers. Start from home. You require a good governance for this to happen. I gave you a school, but this is exactly what UAE did, starting with the policy. The three principles that UAE government live by is one, that anything we want to come up with, the government need to adopt it first before it asks anybody else to adopt, i.e. the ministers, all the people working with them, -1, -2, -3, have to adopt it. So by training them, reskilling them, so they need to do it. Second, create an economy out of that, where people can prosper, people can see economical value of that. Third, share the values, whatever we learned, its successes, with our global partners. So we can emit, and this is exactly what Master was created upon, one of the bidder, is how we share successes with others. And this is what we've been trying to do. Of course, when we work on our first cohort policies, we work on 22 policies in the Circular Economy Council. And on the fourth sector, I mentioned MIFT, right? Manufacturing, food, infrastructure, and transportation. We did not work it ourselves. We could have issued the policy saying, this is the policy now for this waste, this is the policy for food, this is the policy for industrial relating matters, and so forth. What we did instead, for every single policy, we brought subject matter expert from the private sectors. We also collaborated with academia. We also collaborated with NGOs internationally, like what we call MacArthur Foundation in UK. So we brought everybody together and created workshops for them in separate sessions, either through draft policies or either actually live workshop with them. And only then these policies were issued. So they were not done in isolation. They were actually done with collaboration of people. Similarly, the second cohort, we're working on another 22 policies plus. We're exactly doing the same thing. We're exactly following the fifth day of it. We just met, I think, roughly a month ago before, and we wrote it. Quite a lot of people from private sectors gave them what is the roadmap, and now we're going to break out into sessions of working every single policy. And this is how we accept it. Anyhow. Why do you think we achieved whatever we achieved? To summarize that, it was all about leadership. It's all about leadership who had clarity of vision of what they want to do and sincerity. Because if you're not sincere, you'll be caught, by the way. You can be a comedian for 6 months. I always say that, on average. After that, they show you two colors. Immediately. I used to say this thing whenever we used to have a new CEO. And then my previous organization, I was in an organization, we were in 100 countries, by the way. And I had the benefit to work in various countries globally. So I know how government works everywhere because I worked with all of them, particularly in Europe. So whenever we get an issue, it's look, relax, don't get excited or overexcited or underexcited. Just give them 6 months on average. People will change. Higher or low, 6 months low dates. That is all about execution. In the corporate world, we call it when rubber meets the road. The other important thing is how do you have a team which is constantly aligned on what you want to do. Sometimes we see the vision here and people want to talk and get things done. But if you go down, trickle down, like some of the neighboring countries are actually learning through those steps, going through those steps, how do they make sure that all the people are actually aligned to what you want to do? And there are ways of getting that done. And we have been excelling in doing that all the time. Even in the economy, we're doing the same thing, right? But this legacy did not start now. This legacy has been there with the founding father, Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, may Allah be pleased with his soul. It was ingrained in him to take care of the environment. He himself actually been putting water to plants. And when people asked him, Your Highness, why are you building these? And this was in 70s and 80s and 90s in the desert. His simple answer was, our faith entails us and tells us that we should take care of the environment. So we're part of the environment. We should take care of the environment. That's why I'm planting trees. And that was one of the things they were doing, but there are many other things we used to do. So this inspiration came from this, by the way, from Sheikh Zayed, who actually made that happen. It was a very short clip for you.
The late Sheikh Zayed was known for his love of nature. During an inspection of the land development projects, the late Sheikh Zayed noticed that one of the city's oldest trees was located in the middle of a road that was under construction. He requested to keep the tree and that the road should navigate around it to preserve it. Trees in agriculture were just as important as infrastructure, roads, and buildings to the late Sheikh Zayed. And during his rule, between 100 and 150 million trees were planted across the UAE. The late Sheikh Zayed continues to inspire numerous environmental projects in the UAE.
Nothing new, I would say all the time. It's been always there. So, what is the way forward for us? What do we need to do? My first message was and will always be, whenever you go back home tonight, you need to think of these things. How do we make sure we put this changing in the DNA of our culture, whether it's just government, whether it's the company, or wherever you are? Remember, in the beginning I said, is responsible leadership does not mean that you have the authority to do that. You yourself are authorized to make the change. Every single change you make today, tomorrow, will fill in that buckets. So we each are responsible on making things happen. Well, how do we do that thing? We need to educate ourselves. We reskill ourselves. We work with this academia. Of course, we need to make sure that we excel at innovation. I mentioned in the beginning, we were the creator of civilization and innovation. We need to bring that back again. And it's happening. You saw with some of the example I mentioned. Trust me, the example are so many. I probably need the entire day or week to talk about that. How do we build bridges with people? We cannot work in isolation. I always say, if I'm going to digitize one arm of the leg of my trade, and then after that, this trade will go to another country, which is completely manual, I'm not achieve anything. So I rather pass on my learning to them, so they also can benefit. So the entire supply chain becomes benefit out of the digitization. Similarly for sustainability. How do we quickly always measure of what we do and adjust our planning as we also do? Because not everything going to be such a smooth sailing. You will face challenges along the way all the time. If there are no challenges, there's something wrong with the plan. Or maybe you're too lucky. Maybe the former is better. So I think you need to adjust all the time your plan to make sure it happens. I'll end it with the last quote of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed Nazar Mahan, the President of UAE. He said it in the same government summit in 2015. So when he was the crown prince at that point of time, it was all about the messaging. How do we in the next 50 years build something which is diversified and sustainable economy for the future generation so we can actually preserve with them. When you go home tonight, please remember, use yourself, use your loved one to understand and embrace this. Thank you very much.